And you know what? Every time I come in here, I really do wonder, what is the point? Like, why are we here? Because it doesn't seem like we're doing efficiency, right? Like, have we seen Elon? No. Have we seen anybody that works for Doge? No. But we're in the Doge subcommittee and we're talking to everybody but the Doge people.
It was supposed to be just another budget hearing until one name was spoken and the entire room shifted. Elon Musk had been summoned, but his seat empty. His reason for refusing to testify. I built Twitter. I don't answer to Congress. What followed was something no one expected. Jasmine Crockett didn't just question Musk's absence, she weaponized it. With a single folder, she exposed how one man hiding behind tech platforms and political donations had reshaped federal policy without ever raising his hand or facing public scrutiny. Stay with us. In the next few minutes, you'll watch what happens when a chair left empty says more than 1,000 witnesses. The morning light filters through the tall windows of the Rayburn House office building, casting long shadows across marble floors that have witnessed decades of American political theater. In Committee Room 2154, maintenance staff arranged leather chairs around a horseshoe-shaped table, each position marked with a brass nameplate that catches the fluorescent glare overhead. The room fills slowly with the familiar choreography of congressional hearings. Staffers shuffling papers, camera operators adjusting angles, reporters claiming their preferred seats in the gallery. The air hums with anticipation, thick with the institutional weight of oversight and accountability. At the center of the witness table sits an oversized leather chair, its burgundy surface pristine and untouched. A nameplate rests before it, tilted at an odd angle, Elon Musk. Someone has drawn a red line through the name. Not aggressively, but with the resigned precision of a clerk updating records. The chair spins slightly in the artificial breeze from the ventilation system, a slow, hypnotic rotation that speaks of absence. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett enters through the side door, her heels clicking against the polished floor with the rhythm of purpose. She carries herself with the quiet confidence of someone who has learned to navigate rooms designed to diminish her presence. Her eyes scan the assembled space lingering on the empty chair before settling on the hearing agenda projected on the wall, Oversight hearing, evaluating Dogecoin implementation and federal budget efficiency. The irony is not lost on her. A hearing about accountability where the primary architect of the policy refuses to account for himself. She takes her position at the committee table, arranging her materials with methodical precision. A thick folder sits beside her legal pad, its cover bearing a simple label, unanswered, unaccounted. The committee chairman, a Republican from Texas, whose political career has been built on promises of fiscal responsibility and government transparency, calls the session to order. His voice carries the practiced cadence of someone accustomed to performative outrage, but today, there's something different. A subtle hesitation, as if he's aware that the script he's following has missing pages. The first witness takes the podium, a Treasury Department official whose PowerPoint presentation promises to illuminate the efficiency gains achieved through cryptocurrency integration in federal systems. Charts and graphs fill the projection screen. Ascending lines of green indicating reduced processing cost, bar charts showing accelerated transaction times, pie charts breaking down administrative savings. But the camera's eye drifts away from the presenter's animated gestures, focusing instead on the empty chair that seems to command the room's attention despite, or perhaps because of, its vacancy. The nameplate catches the light Musk's crossed-out name, a stark reminder of power that operates through absence rather than presence. The presentation continues with testimonials from bureaucrats who speak of revolutionary efficiency and paradigm shifts in fiscal operations. Their words float over the assembled audience like incense designed to sanctify rather than scrutinize. Each speaker references private sector innovation and technological disruption with the reverence typically reserved for religious doctrine. Crockett remained silent during these testimonials, her pen moving across her notepad in careful strokes. She is taking notes, but not of the speaker's words. Instead, she documents the absences, the questions not asked, the inquiries that hover in the air like ghosts waiting to be acknowledged. When her turn arrives, she doesn't stand immediately. Instead, she opens her folder and removes a single sheet of paper. The document is crisp official, bearing the seal of internal communications and the weight of leaked truth. She holds it up not dramatically, but with the careful reverence one might show a piece of evidence in a murder trial. The room falls silent as she rises, the paper still in her hand. She doesn't speak at first, allowing the silence to expand until it becomes uncomfortable, until the assembled officials begin to fidget in their seats and glance toward the empty chair as if seeking permission from its absent occupant. Transparency. She finally says, her voice cutting through the institutional quiet with surgical precision. The word hangs in the air, simple and unadorned, before she continues. We've heard that word 17 times in the last hour, 17 invocations of transparency from officials defending a program whose primary architect refuses to appear before the body that funds it. She places the document on the podium before her, angling it so the cameras can capture its contents. The letterhead is unmistakable. Internal communications from the Department of Government Efficiency bearing a date from just 2 weeks prior. The text is brief, written in the clipped efficiency of corporate correspondence. Congressional appearance declined. Quote, I built Twitter. I don't answer to Congress. Refer all oversight inquiries to department liaisons. The signature line bears the initials EM, with a flourish that suggests both arrogance and dismissal. The silence that follows is different from the ceremonial quiet that typically punctuates congressional hearings. This is the silence of revelation of truths that reshape the landscape of a conversation. Several Republican committee members shift in their seats, their eyes moving between the document and the empty chair as if seeing it for the first time. Crockett doesn't elaborate on the memo's contents immediately. Instead, she reaches into her folder and withdraws a second document, this one thicker bound with a paper clip that catches the committee room's fluorescent lighting. The tab reads, Previous Declinations. She opens the file with the methodical precision of a prosecutor building a case. The first page shows a Senate Judiciary Committee letterhead from 2023 requesting Musk's appearance regarding content moderation policies on X. Below it, a terse response from his legal team, Mr. Musk, declines to appear, citing indirect relevance to platform operations. The second document bears the seal of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Multiple requests for Musk's testimony regarding Tesla, autopilot safety protocols. Each request met with the same pattern: declined. Delegated deferred to subordinates who could speak to technical specifications, but never to strategic decisions. The third bears yesterday's date. A congressional subpoena for this very hearing returned through legal channels with a notation that has become familiar. Executive schedule conflict, department liaison, authorized to represent interests. She doesn't read these documents aloud. She simply places them on the podium in sequence, creating a visual timeline of absence that speaks louder than any accusation could. The pattern emerges not through dramatic revelation, but through the quiet accumulation of bureaucratic deflection. 3 committees. She says, her voice carrying the weight of institutional memory. 4 years, 7 formal requests for testimony, 0 appearances. The empty chair seems to respond to this recitation, its leather surface catching the light differently now, as if the weight of documented absence has somehow made it more substantial rather than less. She returns to her seat, leaving both the memo and the declination file on the podium like evidence exhibits in a trial where the defendant has chosen not to appear for his own defense. The next witness, a GO official tasked with evaluating the cryptocurrency program's financial impact, approaches the microphone with visible discomfort. His prepared remarks suddenly seem inadequate, crafted for a different hearing than the one now unfolding. As he speaks of measurable improvements and quantifiable benefits, his words compete with the presence of absence, the empty chair that has become the hearing's most eloquent witness. Every mention of efficiency gains is shadowed by the question of who profits from these improvements. Every citation of reduced bureaucratic overhead is haunted by the specter of privatized power operating beyond democratic oversight. The hearing's carefully choreographed narrative begins to unravel. Republican committee members who entered the room prepared to celebrate the marriage of innovation and governance find themselves defending a union where one partner refuses to acknowledge the other's authority. Their questions become defensive, their statements apologetic, as if they're explaining away the behavior of a difficult house guest who has overstayed his welcome but cannot be asked to leave. Democratic members initially prepared to challenge the policy's effectiveness discover something more troubling than mere inefficiency. They uncover the architecture of accountability itself being dismantled by forces that operate through absence rather than presence. Their inquiries shift from technical details to fundamental questions about the relationship between public authority and private power. The empty chair becomes a focal point, its significance growing with each passing minute. Committee members find their eyes drawn to it during testimonies as if expecting its occupant to materialize and explain himself. But the chair remains empty. Its silence more eloquent than any defense could be. Crockett rises again, this time carrying a laptop computer and a projection remote. The committee room's main screen flickers to life, displaying what appears to be an organizational flow chart. At the top sits a single name, Dogecoin Foundation, White Paper Advisory Board. Below it, a series of arrows point toward government entities: Treasury Department FinTech Working Group, Federal Reserve Digital Currency Task Force, Congressional Budget Office, Cryptocurrency Assessment. The chart is sterile bureaucratic, the kind of diagram that typically induces committee room somnolence. But Crockett's presentation strips away the administrative veneer to reveal something more troubling, a web of influence that operates through technical consultation rather than direct lobbying through advisory positions that carry no legal obligations but substantial practical impact. This diagram, she says, clicking to the next slide, represents what the Government Accountability Office described in their 2022 report as public-private partnerships in fintech pilots. The new slide shows dollar amounts. Not the massive figures that typically dominate budget hearings, but smaller sums that carry the weight of precedent. $2.3 million for technical consultation, $4.7 million for implementation guidance, $8.1 million for ongoing system optimization. She clicks again. The screen now displays a series of email timestamps redacted but official, showing correspondence between Treasury officials and external cryptocurrency specialists during the months when federal Dogecoin integration was being developed. The names are blacked out, but the pattern is unmistakable. Policy recommendations flowing from private advisors to public implementation without the traditional oversight mechanisms that govern contractor relationships. The individual whose empty chair commands this room. Crockett continues, her voice maintaining its measured cadence, has managed to influence federal cryptocurrency policy without appearing before a single oversight committee, without registering as a lobbyist, without submitting to the conflict of interest disclosures required of government contractors. She doesn't accuse. She doesn't need to. The documents speak with the authority of official records, creating a portrait of influence that operates in the spaces between legal categories, not illegal, but beyond the reach of traditional accountability mechanisms. The committee room falls silent as members absorb the implications. This is not the familiar territory of corruption or fraud, but something more sophisticated, the systematic construction of influence networks that operate through absence rather than presence, through advisory relationships that carry no legal obligations but substantial practical power. But Crockett is not finished. She clicks to a final slide, one that carries the weight of recent history and unresolved irony. The screen displays a familiar logo, the Twitter bird now transformed into the X symbol, alongside a timeline that begins in December 2022. Twitter files. She says, allowing the phrase to settle in the committee room like dust motes in afternoon light. The release of internal documents showing how federal agencies communicated with social media platforms to influence content moderation. The timeline shows the publication dates the headlines, the congressional hearings that followed, all orchestrated by the same individual whose absence now defines this proceeding. She clicks again. The new slide juxtaposes two headlines: Musk exposes government influence on Twitter, and X modifies algorithm following Musk directives. Below them, a simple question appears on screen: who watches the watchers when the watchers refuse to be watched? This is not the first time the occupant of that empty chair has claimed to expose inappropriate government influence. Crockett says, her gaze moving between the projection screen and the draped nameplate. But exposure followed by exemption is not transparency. It's deflection. It's using the language of accountability to avoid accountability itself. The parallel is devastating in its simplicity. The same individual who positioned himself as a defender of free speech against government overreach now exercises influence over government policy while remaining beyond the reach of government oversight. The empty chair becomes not just a symbol of absence, but of a particular kind of power that operates by revealing others' secrets while keeping its own. We cannot have a system where transparency is a weapon deployed against others but never applied to oneself. She continues. We cannot allow the tools of democratic accountability to be used to undermine democratic accountability itself. The committee room absorbs this final revelation in silence. The carefully constructed narrative of efficient innovation has collapsed under the weight of documented pattern. A pattern of influence exercised through absence of power that operates most effectively when it refuses to submit to the scrutiny it demands of others. The phrase hangs in the air, oversight of a ghost, and suddenly the entire hearing is recontextualized. The assembled officials, the prepared testimonies, the charts and graphs of efficiency gains, all of it becomes theater performed for an audience of one who has chosen not to attend his own show. The ranking Democrat on the committee, a veteran of dozens of oversight hearings, leans forward with the expression of someone who has just glimpsed the emperor's nakedness. His questions become sharper, more focused as he probes the mechanisms by which a private citizen can influence federal policy while remaining beyond the reach of democratic accountability. But it's a Republican member from Ohio who asks the question that crystallizes the day's central paradox. If the individual responsible for these efficiency recommendations is not subject to congressional oversight, how do we know these recommendations serve the public interest rather than private interests? The question hangs unanswered in the committee room's air because the officials present lack the authority to answer it. They can speak to implementation, to technical specifications, to measurable outcomes, but they cannot speak to intention, to motivation, to the fundamental question of whose interests are being served by policies they execute but did not design. But the most powerful moments come not from dramatic confrontations or heated exchanges, but from the quiet accumulation of absences. Each unanswered question, each deferred inquiry, each reference to policies that cannot be explained by their supposed architects builds toward a crescendo of democratic failure. The hearing room's atmosphere grows heavier as the day progresses. What began as a routine oversight session has transformed into something more fundamental, an examination of power itself and the ways it can operate through absence rather than presence. The empty chair becomes a monument to unaccountable influence, its silence more damning than any hostile testimony could be. As the session draws toward its conclusion, Crockett makes one final statement. She doesn't rail against injustice or deliver a stirring call to action. Instead, she speaks with the quiet authority of someone who has witnessed the machinery of democracy being quietly dismantled by forces that prefer to operate in the shadows. Transparency. She says, returning to the word that has haunted the entire proceeding, is not a slogan. It's not a PowerPoint slide or a press release or a campaign promise. Transparency is showing up. It's answering questions. It's subjecting your decisions to the scrutiny of the people who fund them and live with their consequences. She pauses, allowing her gaze to sweep across the committee room, taking in the assembled officials, the watching press, the empty chair that has become the day's most significant presence. We cannot have oversight without sight. We cannot have accountability without someone to hold accountable. And we cannot have transparency when the most powerful voice in the room chooses not to use it. The hearing adjourns with the procedural efficiency of institutional routine, but something has shifted in the room's atmosphere. The empty chair remains behind as members file out, staffers collect their materials, and reporters rush to file their stories. A maintenance worker approaches the witness table, reaching for the nameplate that still bears Musk's crossed-out name. For a moment, he hesitates, as if unsure whether to remove the marker of absence or leave it as testimony to power that operates beyond the reach of democratic norms. In the end, he covers the nameplate with a black cloth, transforming the empty chair into something between a memorial and a warning. The lights dim in the committee room, but the questions raised by the day's proceedings continue to echo in the corridors of power. The hearing has ended, but the oversight of ghosts continues, a reminder that in a democracy, the most dangerous power is the kind that refuses to show its face. The empty chair remains draped in black, a monument to accountability deferred and transparency denied. It speaks without words, testifies without testimony, and indicts without accusation. In its silence, it reveals the loudest truth of all that power exercised in the shadows is the most dangerous power of all. The camera pulls back slowly, capturing the draped chair in the center of the empty room. The nameplate beneath the black cloth remains invisible, but presents a hidden reminder of influence that operates through absence. The room falls silent, but the questions it has raised echo beyond its walls into the corridors of power, where the most important conversations often happen in the spaces between words, in the silences that speak louder than any testimony could. Transparency, the day has taught us, is not what you say. It's whether you're willing to show up to say it.